You can walk into almost any Walmart, Dollar General, gas station, or corner store in America and see the same tragedy playing out in plain sight. It does not look like tragedy. That is what makes it dangerous. It looks normal. It looks like a cart with a few extra things in it. It looks like a new car in the driveway that the owner cannot really afford. It looks like scratch-off tickets on the counter. It looks like a fast food bag in the passenger seat. It looks like a rent-to-own sofa that seemed manageable because the payment was small. It looks like another streaming bill, another warranty, another convenience purchase, another month where the paycheck came in and quietly disappeared. Individually, none of these choices feel life-changing together. Repeated year after year, they can keep a family in the same financial place for a decade. That is what I want you to understand. Poverty is not always caused by one catastrophic decision. Very often it is reinforced by a pattern of ordinary decisions that feel harmless in the moment and destructive, only when you finally add them all up. I grew up in a time when money was scarce and waste was dangerous. During the Depression, people learned quickly that every dollar had a job. If a dollar wandered off into foolishness, there might not be another one coming behind it. That kind of environment teaches you something very useful. It teaches you that the difference between staying fragile and becoming secure is rarely explained by one grand event. More often it is explained by what happens to the small amounts of money that keep flowing through your hands. That is why I have always believed that poor thinking and wealthy thinking are not mainly separated by income. They are separated by direction. Poor thinking asks what a dollar can do for me today. Wealthy thinking asks what a dollar could become if I leave it alone long enough to work for me tomorrow. Once you really understand that, your life begins to change. You stop looking at a purchase only as a purchase. You start looking at it as a fork in the road. One path gives you a moment of relief, pleasure, convenience, or status. The other path gives you future strength. And when you repeat one kind of choice often enough, you eventually arrive at the life that those choices were pointing toward all along. That is the real issue here. Most people who stay broke are not doing it because they are too stupid to understand money. They are doing it because nobody ever taught them that certain common purchases are not neutral. They are compounding against them. They are buying things that drain cash, create dependency, and crowd out the very investments that could have changed their future. So I want to go through the 7 most common traps I see in lower and middle income households and explain them the way I would explain them to someone I cared about. Not with shame, not with financial theater, just with arithmetic, common sense, and the long view. The first trap is the brand new car. This may be the most expensive symbol of bad financial timing in modern America. A person finally gets a decent job. Maybe they are making $40,000, maybe $50,000, maybe a little more. They feel like they have earned the right to step up. They are tired of driving something old. They want reliability, respect, and the feeling that they are finally moving forward. So they go to the dealership, smell the new car smell, and sign for a $35,000 vehicle with a 6 or 7 year loan. That single moment can do more damage than they realize. The dealership does not sell them a car. It sells them a future payment stream. And the car itself begins betraying them immediately. The moment they drive it off the lot, the value drops, not a little, a lot. They may have paid $35,000 for something that is effectively worth $28,000 the moment it leaves the property. They have lost thousands of dollars before the first monthly payment is even due. Then the car keeps depreciating while the loan keeps demanding. Over the next several years, the owner is making payments on a vehicle that is falling in value faster than they are building equity in it. That is a terrible arrangement for somebody trying to get ahead. What makes it worse is that the payment does not arrive alone. The new car often brings higher insurance, more taxes, pressure to maintain a certain image, and the comforting lie that because the payment fits this month, the decision must be affordable. That is not how affordability should be measured. Affordability is not whether the payment can technically clear your account. Affordability is what the payment prevents you from doing. A $600 car payment is not just $600. It is $600 that cannot go toward your emergency fund, your retirement account, your future down payment, your debt reduction, your freedom. And if you carry that payment for 6 or 7 years, you are not merely spending money. You are forfeiting an enormous amount of future compounding. That is why I have always preferred the logic of buying used. A reliable car that is 2 to 4 years old is often the sweet spot. Someone else already absorbed the ugliest depreciation. The vehicle is still useful, still modern enough, still capable of doing what transportation is supposed to do, which is get you where you need to go safely. But now you are buying utility instead of ego. You are paying for function instead of the thrill of being first owner. That is what wealthy thinking often looks like. It does not always ask what feels best right now. It asks, what gets the job done while leaving the most capital available for my future? If you save $15,000 by not buying the new car and instead put that difference into productive assets over time, the outcome can become enormous. You are not giving up a smell and a shiny dashboard. You are potentially buying yourself $250,000 of future security. That is not a cosmetic trade. That is a life trade. The second trap is lottery tickets and scratch-offs. I have said for years that the lottery is a tax on people who do not understand arithmetic, and I mean that literally, not cruelly. It is one of the most efficient machines ever invented for converting hope into loss. I understand why people buy them. When you are stuck, the fantasy of a sudden escape is intoxicating. $5 does not feel like much. It buys a brief emotional experience. For a few hours or a few days, you get to imagine that your life might change without all the discipline, delay, and effort that real wealth requires. In that sense, the lottery is not really selling a ticket. It is selling emotional relief. That is why it is so powerful. And that is exactly why it is so destructive. The odds are grotesque. You are essentially lighting money on fire for the privilege of borrowing a fantasy. Yet I have seen household after household with weak finances spend meaningful money on tickets every week. They tell themselves it is just a little, a few here, a few there, maybe 20 this week, maybe 30 next week. By the end of the month, it is real money. By the end of the year, it is serious money. By the end of a decade, it could have been the seed of an account that actually changes the family. That is the part people miss. The true alternative to the lottery is not doing nothing. The true alternative is investing. If you took the same money and started feeding it into a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, or even a regular brokerage account invested in a low-cost index fund, you would own a real mechanism for improvement, not a fantasy. A mechanism, and unlike the lottery, which depends on absurd luck, the mechanism of compounding becomes more likely to reward you the longer you stay with it. That is the great psychological reversal most people need. They think discipline is boring and luck is exciting. I think discipline is the only realistic form of hope that compounds. The third trap is payday loans and cash advance services. These businesses are built around desperation. They exist because millions of people do not have emergency savings, and when life pushes them into a corner, they need cash immediately. The problem is that the product being sold is not really help. It is speed plus punishment. A payday lender gives a person short-term relief and then attaches a price so outrageous that the relief becomes a fresh problem almost immediately. The borrower was already short of money. 2 weeks later, they are still short of money, except now they are short plus fees, so the loan rolls over. Then it rolls over again. Before long, the person has paid a shocking amount in fees and still has not solved the original shortage. This is not a sign of moral failure. It is a sign of fragility. And fragility is expensive. The obvious long-term answer is to build an emergency fund, even if it begins painfully small. $25 a month is not impressive. $50 a month is not exciting, but excitement is not the objective. Resilience is a family with even a modest cash buffer can avoid a world of predatory nonsense. A flat tire, utility bill, minor repair, or temporary gap in income does not automatically turn into a financial emergency that must be financed at absurd rates. That is why I tell people to stop admiring emergency funds as a financial cliché and start respecting them as anti-desperation capital. An emergency fund does not make you rich. It keeps you from doing rich, destroying things. And that is a very valuable job. If you are already in the trap, the first goal is to stop the bleeding and deal with reality directly. Call the landlord, call the utility company, ask for the payment plan, negotiate. Be embarrassed for 10 minutes instead of being exploited for 6 months. Pride is expensive when it drives you toward a loan structure designed to eat weak households alive. The fourth trap is rent-to-own furniture and electronics. This one is especially dangerous because it disguises itself as affordability. A sofa for a certain amount per month, a television for another amount per month, a washer, a laptop, a phone, a living room set, all broken down into payments that seem manageable because the total has been hidden. That is how the trap works. The company wants you to think monthly, not totally. It wants you to say, "I can handle $69." It does not want you to dwell on the fact that over the full term you may be paying 4 times the actual retail value of the item. The customer walks out feeling relieved. The store locks in a stream of inflated payments from someone who is already financially weak. That is not commerce in the healthiest sense. It is extraction. Again, the answer is not glamour. The answer is patience and humility. Used furniture is not glamorous. Marketplace deals are not glamorous. Estate sales are not glamorous. Thrift stores are not glamorous. But they often make infinitely more financial sense. A person trying to build security should not be using financing to simulate a lifestyle that their balance sheet has not yet earned. Their job is not to have the prettiest couch this year. Their job is to stop being financially breakable. That requires a willingness to own things that are good enough rather than finance things that are supposed to signal progress. I have always found that people who eventually build wealth get comfortable with temporary imperfection. They do not require every stage of life to look polished. They are willing to let their furniture, car, and visible lifestyle lag behind their long-term goals for a while. That willingness often creates the room that future comfort is built on. The fifth trap is extended warranties and insurance on small items. Retailers love these because the margins are wonderful, and the math usually favors the seller. The pitch sounds reasonable. Protect your laptop, protect your headphones, protect your phone, add the plan, add the coverage, add the monthly insurance. Piece by piece, households begin paying recurring protection costs on items that are not genuinely financially catastrophic. That is the key distinction people should learn. Insurance is for devastation. Insurance is not for annoyance. If losing the asset would financially wreck you, insure it, your health, your home, your car, your life. If people depend on your income, those things matter. But a phone, a pair of headphones, or a mid-priced appliance is usually not the sort of event that should require a formal insurance product layered with deductibles, exclusions, waiting periods, and premiums. A better method for most ordinary households is self-insurance on smaller items. Set aside money, build a replacement fund. Let it grow. If nothing breaks, you keep the money. If something breaks, you use the money. Either way, you remain in control. With retail protection products, the business is counting on the odds being in its favor. Why volunteer to be the wrong side of that equation over and over? What wealthy thinking learns to do is separate emotional fear from statistical reality. It asks, is this risk big enough to transfer? Or is this something I can absorb more intelligently by saving? That one distinction can stop 1,000 little leaks. The sixth trap is bloated entertainment spending. This one irritates people because it feels harmless and deserved. A household works hard, they want to relax. So they keep the cable package, the premium package, the sports package, the internet package, and then they stack streaming services on top. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 6. The monthly total begins to look silly, especially for a family with little savings and no real investment momentum. I am not against entertainment. I am against entertainment that quietly cannibalizes future security while pretending to be too small to matter. That is what repeated subscription spending often does. It creates a background drain, not enough pain in any given month to force attention, but enough over time to damage wealth formation. The family is effectively financing comfort in the present by stealing from future flexibility. There is a smarter way to do this. Keep the essentials. Rotate the extras. Use 1 or 2 services at a time. Cancel aggressively. Resubscribe later if you want something else. Accept that you do not need every option at once. Abundance is not having all entertainment available immediately. Abundance is having control over your financial life. That is what many people misunderstand. Comfort purchased without discipline becomes dependency. Comfort purchased inside a thoughtful structure remains pleasure. The difference is not emotional. It is mathematical. The seventh trap is fast food and convenience spending. This may be the most invisible trap of the 7, because almost everyone can rationalize it. I was busy, I was tired, I forgot lunch, I needed coffee. It was only a few dollars. That last phrase has destroyed a lot of futures. Only a few dollars, repeated often enough, becomes hundreds a month. Hundreds a month become thousands a year. Thousands a year become the exact sums that could have built an emergency fund, paid off debt, or seeded real investments. Fast food and convenience spending also carries a second penalty people rarely discuss. It often costs more while delivering less. Less health, less control, less planning discipline. A lunch purchased every workday feels normal because it is common. Common is not the same as cheap. Common is not the same as wise. The better habit is not necessarily never spending. The better habit is intentional spending. Make food at home more often. Buy in normal grocery channels instead of expensive convenience channels. Understand the premium you are paying for immediacy. Then ask whether that premium is worth what it steals from the future. I do not say this from a place of moralism. I say it from a place of arithmetic. If you buy coffee at home for cents and buy coffee out for several dollars, that gap matters. If you buy soda at the grocery store for a fraction of the convenience store price, that gap matters. If you make lunch at home and save over months and years, that gap matters. Once you train yourself to see the gap, you stop viewing convenience as free. You start seeing it as a luxury, which is exactly what it is. Now, if you step back, all 7 traps share the same basic DNA. They are all built around instant gratification. They all encourage short-term feeling over long-term function. They all flatter the present self while quietly billing the future self. And that is why they are so dangerous for families already operating with thin margins. Thin margins cannot absorb repeated self-inflicted leaks. That is why the entire conversation comes down to one idea. You must learn to think in future value. When most people look at a purchase, they ask the wrong question. They ask, can I afford this right now? That is one of the weakest financial questions ever invented. A person can technically afford many things in the short term that they absolutely cannot afford in the long term. The better question is, what is this costing me in future strength? That new car is not merely a car payment. It is lost investment capital. Those lottery tickets are not entertainment. They are displaced contributions. That payday loan is not just a quick fix. It is an invitation into compounding pain. That rent-to-own couch is not furniture. It is a lifestyle tax on impatience. Those warranties are not safety. They are tiny recurring leaks. That cable bundle is not relaxation. It is a background transfer from your future to your present. That daily convenience spending is not trivial. It is the repeated sale of tomorrow for a little comfort today. Once you begin thinking this way, something profound happens. Money stops being a series of disconnected transactions. It becomes a system of trade-offs. And when you see the trade-offs clearly, discipline gets easier because the hidden cost is no longer hidden. So what should you do? Start with one trap. Not all 7 won't. Look at your statements, not your memory. Memory lies. Statements tell the truth. Add up what you actually spent over the last 3 months. Then annualize it. Make the number real. Most people change only when they are forced to confront a figure they can no longer romanticize. Then cut one category hard and redirect the savings automatically. That last part matters. Do not merely spend less and hope the difference survives. Hope is not a system. Redirect the difference into an IRA, a Roth if eligible, a brokerage account, an emergency fund, something productive. Move it automatically. The day after payday is ideal because it removes the illusion that what remains in checking is all available for consumption. Then, after a few months, cut another trap. Build momentum. Let the first success teach you that these trade-offs are survivable. You do not have to become perfect overnight. You do have to stop telling yourself that these patterns are too small to matter, because they do matter. I have been around investing long enough to tell you something with complete confidence. Wealth is rarely built by huge dramatic acts. It is built by what you keep, where you place it, and how long you leave it there. The households that pull ahead are not always the highest earners. Very often they are simply the ones that stopped poisoning their own progress. They bought the used car. They stopped financing furniture. They stopped paying for fantasies. They stopped renting comfort from future cash flow. They saved. They invested, they repeated. That is what eventually changes a family, not one miracle. A chain of better decisions. And the best part is that this kind of change does not require permission from anybody. You do not need a higher title first. You do not need a lucky break first. You do not need to suddenly become a different person. You need to decide that every dollar entering your life will now be asked a harder question. Are you here to entertain me for 5 minutes? Or are you here to strengthen my future? If you ask that question often enough and answer it honestly, your financial life will not remain the same. Because the people who eventually win with money are usually not the people with the flashiest income, the fanciest taste, or the most impressive vocabulary. They are the people who become unwilling to waste capital on things that make them feel richer while keeping them poor. That is the shift. That is the whole game. And once you make it even slowly, the future begins to look very different from the past.